we've been talking about, what's happening in society and COVID-19 and all that kind of stuff. And last week we talked about the immune system. And today we're going to talk a little bit about mindset, which is, I think, going to be a really cool topic and something that I think we could probably talk for days on, actually, because there's so many. When I was thinking about it this week, there's so many different avenues that we could go with this. But again, one of the big things that I'm seeing is that, and I'm sure you're all seeing it, is like there's this like cloud of fear. Everybody's, kind of walking around and walking on eggshells, and obviously maybe there's need for caution, but fear creates physiological problems in the body, and high cortisol levels obviously deteriorate the immune system, and there's this, a lot of people call it the mind-body connection, but there's no difference between the mind and body. I think traditionally, a lot of times in the Western thought, we think of the mind as separate from the body. The brain is an organ, and it functions collectively with the body, and the body affects the brain, and the brain affects the body. So I think we're going to kind of get into that. I think, it comes down to stress. We talk about stress a lot, and when I think of stress, probably my favorite author in this area is Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if any of you guys have read Eckhart Tolle, but Power of Now. And one of the concepts here is that all of our stress is derived from either thinking about what may happen in the future or what did happen in the past. Another way to sort of couch that is when we're thinking about the future, they call it anxiety, and when we're thinking about the past, they call it depression. But all of our stress is derived, if you think about it, so to speak, from not being in the present moment. And so I've always found that when I found that book, probably, I don't know, it was shortly after it came out, so maybe it's 20 years ago or something of that nature. I read it, and it just made so much sense to me, and I ended up reading it another 35 times over. So it sort of soaked into me. But I found it very interesting, and I remember I used to live in Atlanta, and I was driving. They have these like 6-lane highways, and I'm driving down the road, and somebody cut me off really bad, and I remember sort of reacting to it, and I didn't, my body reacted to it, but I didn't I'm from New York, so normally we flipping the bird and get mad and stuff like that. And I thought, what the hell is wrong with you? But you can get yourself to a place where you're not so reactive to what's going on around you if you're in this present moment. Because if you think about it, right now, in this moment, does anybody have a problem right now? Maybe 5 minutes from now you do. Maybe 5 minutes ago you did. But in this moment, you don't. So we've got some cool, I think, things coming up from some of our panelists here. So Matt, I'm looking at you. So why don't you give us some thoughts on that?
Great. So I think, empowering the present moment was one of my big takeaways from what you just said there, and the ability to do that. If we're dealing with mindset, of course, the mind only has the capacity to wander between the future and the past. And that has certain implications when it becomes what drives us. I think it was it last week, Rebecca, that you were talking about the mind as the 600-pound gorilla or something like that. We had a conversation around that. But the mind, to me, that's sort of what it is. It's this big force, or perhaps it's a 90-piece brass band. And it's playing on top of our heads all the time. And sometimes that can really drown out the present moment. So as many tools and skill sets as we can cultivate for ourselves, as well as really understanding our own personal operating system and where we have resource and where we have challenges, so that ultimately we have a skill set to be able to navigate this change in a good, powerful way that's unique to us, I think is a really good place to start with all of that. So maybe we can circle back around to that in a little bit, but that's where I'd like to start today.
Yeah, I think it makes me think of, and I know we talk about this in our sort of work that we do, is how, and we mentioned this a little bit in the previous weeks, about how when we're stressed, we withdraw our resources from our frontal cortex, which is where we are able to consider what's happening and make changes and adapt, right? Which is a highly needed thing, adaptation. And we go to our hindbrain, which is our survival mode, which is just sort of hunker down. And I think, a lot of times, like in what we're doing with our clients, and they're working with, lifestyle changes and stuff, it's hard to make lifestyle changes and do positive things for yourself when you're in fear and stress.
Yeah. And I might say it's impossible.
Yeah, I guess close to impossible. Yeah, it's certainly a struggle if you could do it at all, but you have to be able to access that frontal cortex to some degree to be able to make change.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that. I think one of the greatest tyrannies is speculation. Okay, so when you live with speculation, what if, what if, what if? And that, if you're living in the moment, you're not living in speculation. So, you know, my background is biblical Christianity, so I believe the words of Jesus, you know, don't worry about tomorrow, today has enough trouble of its own. And also that one of our greatest enemies is the robbing us of the joy that we have in the moment, because there's always going to be trouble. There will always be trouble. If it's not this trouble, it will be the next, but today has enough trouble of its own. So just deal with that and be grateful. Have gratitude. I think gratitude is a huge stress reliever because there's so much to be thankful for, little tiny things, little things, big things. But like, I like to live my day like symbolically, like the day is done. You know, in my mind, I rip it off the calendar, I crumple it up and I throw it in the trash can and it's gone. I take off my clothes that I wore that day and I stick them in the hamper and they're done. Like that day is done. And then the next day is bright and fresh and new. And I think that's super important. That's what we're all getting at, is living in the moment and not living in the fear of speculation of things that likely will never happen. And so robbing yourself of the joy of the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, breathing can be really helpful for that. Just you are constant breathing. So just focusing your attention on your breath, you can really help to bring you into the present moment. In Chinese medicine, there's a phrase where the mind goes, the qi flows. I'm an acupuncturist. My name's Allison. I practice Chinese medicine. And that phrase really just goes to show you that where you can direct your mind and shift your attention can have such a significant impact on actually changing your physical state.
Right. And you know, one of the things I want to mention, I heard from Rebecca, what you're saying is like creating ritual. Like that's part of your ritual. And I think it's important that we have rituals that can help ground ourselves. You know, and it's different for everybody. For me, it's, you know, playing my guitar and writing music is my ritual to bring myself to center myself. But having something is a really important thing.
Yeah. Do you all have rituals? Do you want to go around and kind of tell people what we do?
Not really.
Okay. Well, you already did.
Everybody but Rebecca.
Well, not really. I have other rituals. That was just an example.
Yeah. I always try to start my day with meditation. I try to do 20 minutes, but I don't always do it. But I don't want to say always because there are days that I don't. But even if I feel really rushed, I try to just do at least I'll tell myself I'm going to sit down for 30 seconds. And I say, nope, no matter what happens, I have 30 seconds. And just giving myself those few breaths, and in the course of that 30 seconds, it'll shift my whole attitude for the day. It really will. And a lot of times I'll end up staying there a little bit longer, or even if it's just 5 minutes. So it doesn't have to be the actual exercise that you give yourself as much as just the commitment to that ritual or whatever it does that keeps you, that you decided that you're going to do, that's going to keep you in the present moment.
Right. And I think, you know, a lot of times people talk about meditation, and that can be hard, you know, sit down and put 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, into meditation. But really everything can be a meditation. Like walking out to the car, putting your hands on the steering wheel, like just being present in everything you do. Or when you're with somebody, your spouse, your significant other, or your family members, being totally with them, because we tend to be somewhere else, you know, in our mind, and we're not being present. And, you know, that's really all meditation is being present in the moment. So you can, I think, apply that to any act you do, whether it's painting or playing music or being with another person.
Yeah.
I think the key is that we're talking about consistent action and commitment over time. so that we create momentum with these routines that we have, and so, so what are some examples of that? We covered meditation, prayer, mindfulness, even having a mindfulness journal that you keep, or a gratitude, getting up and writing down 3 things that you're grateful for that day. Physical exercise is huge. It's so huge. We take better care of our cars than we do our bodies.
Right.
Got to get up and move. It's so important.
Right. And it's easy to sort of hunker down on our computers these days, right? Instead of getting out there and doing stuff.
Right. And ultimately what that will lead to as a routine is that it will lead to a disconnection from the physiology of the body, which will disempower our body's ability to heal, to be resilient, to be adaptive, and will compromise, as we're talking about today, our mindset.
Mm. I like to set boundaries. So even just boundaries of when I'm going to interact with clients via email or something like that. It's just like the time is done. Now, I might come outside of that, based on a certain circumstance, but I'm really good at doing that, saying I came home and now I'm going to make supper and I'm not going to open my email. I'm going to do something else for the rest of the evening.
Yeah. It's like wearing one hat at a time, right? So I'm going to go into work and I'm going to put my work hat on.
Yeah.
And you leave for lunch and you're like, okay, I'm going to put my mindfulness hat on. When I walk down the street to get my lunch, I'm going to just focus on my breath. And then it's like just one thing at a time. I think we're so good at multitasking because of the society that we live in. And we've always been rewarded for doing that and praised for it. So it's almost a challenge to slow down and just do one thing at a time. But that's how your body has really been built over the years of evolution. It's just slower. And I think it can integrate things so much easier that way as well.
Something interesting I heard on the news last night Catholic Medical Center reporting heart attack rate is 40% down right now than it usually is at this time of year. And you would think heart attack related to stress. And one of the speculations was because the stress of normal everyday life has been lifted from a lot of people. They can't be running the rat race they always were. And what does that tell us about what our usual stress level is in our society? You would think with people so worried about COVID and all of this kind of thing going on, that the heart attack rate would go up. It's down 40%.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's cool.
That is
We can speculate.
Yeah, we could speculate about that.
And Becky, you were talking about the gratitude piece, and then Allison with the mindfulness. So rituals that form around that, especially when we start our day, is really important. I know that as soon as I open my eyes, which happens in little bits in the morning because my cat is running around my room and, is letting us know that he's hungry. But my gratitude is just say thanks for waking me up today, just giving that praise of I woke up again today. Yes, I get to work through this day. And, the ritual, I like to stretch in bed before I get out just because it's more warm in my bed than it is in my room. And so, and then I'll just get myself, and as soon as I'm ready to get out, my cat knows exactly that I want to, so he jumps in bed and then he's like all cuddly and cute, so that delays my day, which is really funny. But it always makes me grateful that he's there to greet me, and it's a big piece. And one thing that I remember talking about when I worked in Colorado to create self-gratification was having an exercise that, if meditating, even for 5 minutes is too long, if working out even for 5 minutes is too long for someone, one simple thing is as soon as you finish getting ready for the day and you're about to walk out, this is like one action step anybody could do. Just look in the mirror and smile at yourself.
I do that.
Yay. See? And you're just like, yes. And it uplifts you. Be like, man, you're awesome. You're going to go take on this day and it's going to be great. And
I didn't know anybody else did that but my daughter and I. Yeah.
yeah, well, hey.
And you say,
Learn
you look
things.
marvelous.
You look marvelous,
Why
darling.
not? I'm like, thank you. I'm holding up pretty well.
I think really in these little moments and having little moments like that throughout the day is like just as important and maybe even more important than like saying, okay, today I'm gonna go to my yoga class or today I'm gonna discipline myself and meditate. If you can just do frequent little things, like it can work with your lifestyle. It doesn't have to be this big commitment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think about what you guys are talking about, I think of, some of you are probably familiar with Dr. Emoto and the experiments they've done with, basically putting the word love on a glass of water,
Oh, yeah.
and how it changes the molecular structure. And
Mm.
so
Oh,
it
with the
just
crystal,
shows you,
right? When they freeze it.
yeah, they show the crystallization of it. If any of you in the audience don't know, look him up, Dr. Emoto, and it's really cool. But just the
They hit
idea that
messages in
your
water.
thoughts really change the molecular makeup. I mean, you think about your body being, what is it, over 75% water, and how, if you have the thought of love, how that's going to, how the change that makes in your body, versus if you're walking around with hate or fear or those types of things, what that will do to your body, is really interesting. So I kind of like to segue into, we're talking about like, oh, here's the things that you can do, to change your mindset. There
If you can
go.
read it, this is the third book of it. Emoto, Love Thyself, The Messages from Water. This is the third book or second book, but yeah, whole book.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Really cool stuff. So I'd like to kind of like maybe segue without getting too scientific about things, but kind of talk a little bit maybe about, things like this, like how does this really affect our physiology and our immune system, for instance. So, something simple like it's been shown that raising the cortisol levels in the body deteriorates the immune system. And so, obviously walking around and we're all in fear, especially collectively, is that helping our cause or is that hurting our cause? Any of you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can start. So one of the things like in this, I believe, Allison, where the mind goes, the energy flows, or the chi flows, right? Very, very powerful comment, quote, if you will. And we put up a quote in our office this week, actually, which piggybacks on that, and I thought was kind of interesting. And basically, if you really knew how powerful your thoughts were, you would never think another negative thought again. Like, that's how powerful. If thoughts become things, it's the basic principle of law of attraction. And it really does affect stress physiology, how our bodies process things, whether our cortisol levels are higher or they're at their baseline, they're normal. And just want to piggyback real quick, Jean, what you had said about Atlanta being 6 lanes of traffic. Well, guess what? It's about 10 now living from Atlanta. So imagine the stress levels of down there now. So anyway, just coming from there. So what is one of the major conditions that most people are suffering from right now is anxiety and depression, right? You have people walk into your office and they may have aches and pains and concerns, but really deep down, there's a lot of anxiety and depression. And as that happens, it's due to stress physiology over time, right? And I think Allison might touch on this, but frustration and anger is basically frozen in our body, and we become depressed in the mindset and in the body, and we don't really bring our energy to that, and then we shut it off. And then what do we look for? We look for a medication to cover it up because we don't want to experience it or feel it within ourselves. Or we are looking outside of ourselves for someone else to fix us or something else to fix us, right? And we're not taking on the responsibility to changing that in the first place, like really becoming aware. And you were talking about we're shutting off that frontal cortex awareness, and it's bringing online just the limbic system, which is our survival: eat, breathe, sleep, reproduce. Basically that mindset, it's basic animal brain thought, which is in the limbic system, right? And the stress in our life is not going to go away. And so if we don't handle it, then how does that precipitate in the body? It's called defense posture. And defense posture is that, because we are very big at talking posture in the body and really helping people just become more aware of themselves, oddly. But the defense posture is when, if you can see, is when we start to like roll the shoulders in. And the mindset that can become that is, I'm not good enough, or I don't have enough. It's the negative thoughts that the inner speak that we talk to ourselves in a negative way. So therefore our posture starts to close down on itself. And then with that, the head starts to go forward. So you're closing off your heart, so you're not feeling as much, and you're also thinking more with your brain, not your mind so much, but like the brain. You're thinking your way through life rather than feeling your way through life. And defense posture is exactly that. And the fun analogy that I don't know if it's fun or not, but the very common analogy that we talk about is, what is the common posture of someone who's texting?
Yeah.
Right. We can interact. It's cool. Yeah. Like looking down, right? The posture of looking down. I mean, walk anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are in this world right now. Walk on the street, maybe not right now, but walk around when things are normal again, and you'll see people looking down on their phones, right? Or we're all on computers, right? And we have a tendency to close down and bring that head forward and really shut off our connection between our brain and our body. And that creates the defense posture. And then it creates a lower energy mindset. So we always ask people, like, what do you want in life? And that takes more energy to think about. People are like, I don't really know, but I'll tell you, but I don't want, this, I don't want that. I don't want, headaches, migraines. I don't want stomach problems. I don't want to fight with my spouse. I don't want financial problems. Like, whatever it may be, it's creating that mindset of less, lack, and scarcity, which is what we unfortunately live in right now. And the opposite tier of that, or the opposite mindset, is abundance and fulfillment. And the more we go from this defense posture and we learn to connect with ourselves and come more upright and lead life with the heart, or for Becky, like if, being connected more with God, whatever works for you, it's a completely different physiological state from this up and open to closed down.
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of proverbs that come to mind. And one is, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. And then the other, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is.
Yes.
So this is this whole, this is why nourishing this is so key to health.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, Tisa, it reminds me of one of our mentors, Dr. Epstein. One of the things he always used to say was, the degree of flexibility that you have in life is proportional to the degree of flexibility that you have in your body, particularly your spine. And so I think the take from this that I would say is, like, if we're paying attention to, like, when we're on the computer or on the phone, when we're experiencing that event in our head, right, the past or the worry about the future, and we're paying attention to how we're doing this, everything you experience is through the filter of your previous experiences. And if you're holding on to that experience like this, then it's really hard to experience the abundance and the different side of it, or what the gift is here in this. And so if we can just take ourselves, like, consciously out of that posture, it just changes your whole perspective. If you're sitting there at home, you could actually do this right now. Like, put yourself like this and see how it feels in your body and how it affects your thoughts, and then just simply change your posture, open up your chest, bring your head back, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, the world looks different.
Right. And then you can breathe again, like Allison, just being mindful of your breathing. The breath opens up and it's like, whoa, it's just a connection. It's just a more mindfulness and just being aware, which is really, really powerful.
Yeah. You're literally getting more energy and more blood to those areas of your body if you change your posture. I mean, physiologically, you're doing that. And then, yeah, in Chinese medicine, when we talk about mindset, we talk about the word that we use is Shen, and it translates to spirit, and the Shen resides within your heart. So it's, you know, it's just all these different connections all pointing at the heart and your posture and whatnot.
By the way, for those of you who are viewing at home, wherever you are, guests and attendees, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, we'll do some Q&A here at the end. So you can start putting those questions in now, based on the conversation that's going on, so we can address those in a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of have a question. Allison, I'm curious if you could, some of what we're talking about, if you could frame that a little bit with maybe the traditional Chinese medicine sort of lens, because I think that's so different and so valuable to us.
Yeah, I think that as, you know, all of us as practitioners, we know that our emotional states are very much connected to our physical states. In Chinese medicine, the way that we diagnose and the way that we form a treatment strategy is we use a pattern. And so within the same pattern, you can have both emotional symptoms and physical symptoms. And then when you go to treat that, whatever that ailment is, the main complaint the person's coming in for, you're actually treating the entire pattern all at the same time. And more oftentimes than not, someone's going to come in with more than one thing, right? I have this, 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 and this. And a lot of the times they're all the similar pattern. So for example, someone might come in with anxiety, and that specific type of anxiety might be like a ruminating thought process. So they have like, and you have to ask like specifically, how is this anxiety affecting you? What is it like? Because it can be different things in the body. But if it's a ruminating thought process where you're kind of like worrying about things over and over, and it's kind of like the circular sort of thought process, you can't get it out of your head. That person will often have problems with their digestive system because it's the same pattern. So they could have like sugar cravings, fatigue after eating, or feeling bloated or gassy, or looser, softer bowel movements. And so the acupuncture points I would use actually have dual purpose in treating that digestive complaint as well as that overthinking mind pattern. So it literally is one and the same. And you could, for every pattern, and there's going to be a correlating sort of emotional state that's going to go with that.
Yeah, it's really sort of a holistic view because everything is connected. You can't really separate the two.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the roots and the branches. Like if you can address the roots, then the branches will all flourish. You don't really go after the branches, you go after the roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just from a simple, like a lot of people, again, we were talking about this before we got on, is how, when we're hunkered down in stress, we want to stress eat. We want to like eat more sugar. Just a little perspective. Years ago, coming from an autoimmune, situation, my own situation, I had to stop eating sugar just because my body hurt so bad. But I remember that in my life, it was pretty normal to have like up and down days for no particular reason. Like just some days I'd be depressed, some days I wouldn't. I just felt like it was pretty normal. Like I never experienced anything different in my life. And I stopped eating sugar just because of the pain in my joints. And then after like 2 or 3 months, I looked back and I was like, wow, I don't have any more of those days. And that went on for years, literally, like, just by changing that one thing. And so there's a mind part of it, like being intentional with how we direct our thoughts and what we're talking about. But there's also your physiology, as we're saying, your body, how it works, and the nutrients or the things that we put in it, like sugar that's inflammatory, that causes inflammation in the body and inflammation in the brain, contribute to some of these things. So sometimes, as I think Tisha, you were saying, we see a lot of people, not only these days, but all the time, come in with depression, anxiety as main complaints. And we just look initially to see how much sugar you're eating. If there's one thing that you could do that any health from any practitioner is just lower the amount of sugar, then you're going to have an immediate change in your brain function.
Yeah. One of the problems with the sugar too is that as an anti-nutrient, sugar depletes the B vitamins, which are super important for managing stress. The more stress you have, the faster you run out of your B vitamins, and they're water soluble, they're gone. So you've got to really understand how that all interacts. So not only does sugar not contribute nutrients, but it uses up your nutrients just to handle it within your body.
And it costs you nutrients.
Yeah, it costs you nutrients. So that's one of my things, is like making sure that, stress is, like we said, it's going to be every day. It doesn't have to be related to this particularly stressful time. Making sure that you have those foundational nutrients like magnesium, like the the B vitamins, and making sure that you're nourishing yourself that way, and then not hindering with a lousy diet with things. Dr. Clerkin, one of the things that you were saying, I have a friend who's a physician with psoriatic arthritis. When he was in medical school, he was in a wheelchair, and he has totally changed his diet. He doesn't do any lectins, he doesn't do sugar, he doesn't do any grain, nothing like that. And he's transformed his life. And, he'll tell his patients, yeah, there's medication out there. There's medications we can use if you're not willing to do this. But, this is so powerful. And sometimes I think, it's easy to underestimate the power of diet.
It's a huge piece.
Absolutely. And I think when we take a look at diet, we can sort of frame that as a building block of, the basic physiology, so that there's, in the work that we do in the office, we sort of take a look at this aspect as this bioenergetic force, or this life force, this gift that we've been given that keeps our metabolism running. And it's really, I think, bigger picture, to the degree with which we can understand and self-assess with deep, authentic, clarity and honesty, what we have resource in, and then what we have challenges in, will be directly related to our ability to be able to navigate stressful situations. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's the day-to-day, the go, Allison, like you said, that we're wired for, or if now it's the stressful, what if, or the cloud of fear, like you talked about, Dr. Jean. It was estimated last week, there's 2.5 billion people on lockdown around the world right now. 2.5 billion. Like, think about that, and what the reverberation is in that amazing connectivity that we have just as human beings. Just like you have a really good friend, or, your closest confidant that walks in the room and you know exactly how they feel in that moment. Imagine on a subconscious level, the exponential effect of what we're talking about here. So if we're already wired for go, 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 and even though like our heart attack rates, are through the roof, and now all of a sudden they're not, because we're not go, 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 the patterns in the mind are still there for go, go, go. Now put a blanket of 2.5 billion people on lockdown on top of that. That's a lot of stress. That's a big increase in cortisol level. And ultimately, that's going to tie into the emotion and limbic system, like you were talking about, Dr. Tisa. And we have to take a look then at, so really the self-assessment of so this life force, this bioenergetic sort of intelligence that governs our body here and our ability to heal, so let me give you an example. So is it that you are, so it's kind of like two camps here, that you need to pay attention to what you eat and how much sleep you get, and say how much exercise, and that if and when you do those things, you get tremendous benefit? Or are you the kind of person who can sleep 3 hours a night, get up, eat whatever you want, keep going, you don't get sick, and when you do, you heal really quickly, like you just keep on going, going, going? Like, we all know those people. those people have a high level of this bioenergetic intelligence that is governing their body naturally. I personally don't fall into that camp. I have to work a little bit harder at that.
You're talking about like George Burns or something?
Right. So where are you in that camp? So just a little self-assessment can go a really long way, in understanding that. And then also, if we're dealing with stress, we have to take a look at our emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is, so emotion is instantaneous response. It's not something that we think ourselves through. It's primitive, it's wired in there, instantaneous. So how easy is it is again, self-assessment, is it for you to be basically spontaneous? Is it really easy to not think about something and just, get just got to do this and do it? Or do you slow down and think your way through it a little bit more? So the example of that could be, let's put this in like an office situation. There's someone on the team and they are just kicking butt. Like their sales are through the roof. And when the rest of the team gets together, they're like, hey, not for nothing, but how is that guy doing so well? It just doesn't make sense. He's not really all that smart. I don't really understand, how he's so good, and yet he's top in sales and he's, all this great stuff. And the truth is that someone like that has great access to emotional intelligence. Something comes through and they're like, I need to call this person. Bam, they get on the phone, they call them, deal done. I don't know why they call them. And someone else who doesn't necessarily have that kind of access to that is going to think their way through it. They get the impulse to call, but then they're like, oh, well, what if, sort of like the tyranny of speculation comes in, like you were talking about, Becky, oh, well, what if this and what if that? And then maybe I need to orchestrate it a little bit more. Whereas if they had just been able to access it, and how if you need to spend a little bit more time with this is that when you're around someone like that, you start to get a little uneasy, their ability to just bam, do this and bam, do that, or you find yourself starting to make little judgments about this or that. Those are usually signs that we're a little challenged in our emotional intelligence. So if we take a look at those two things and understand that these two pieces are what reside in that lower part of the brain when we're in this fight or flight physiology, like you were talking about, Dr. Tisa, the stress physiology and defense posture, and what just happens naturally when we're wearing it on our skeleton, So that's what resides in these places. So the building blocks that we were just talking about, how to increase the bioenergetic and the life force governing intelligence, how to navigate the emotional intelligence and the ability to handle the stress and take immediate action for ourselves. These are super important things because that's what's running the show right now. So a lot of us are really good at thinking our way through things or having a big picture, or even having that sort of what we might consider more of a soul connection, where it's right place, right time, doors clicking, opening on the hinges, just kind of grooving, everything's nice and easy, and we can sometimes enjoy that at the sort of disregard to these building blocks like we're talking about here. So really, really important stuff.
Would you say that sort of what I'm hearing you say is basically find where your strengths are and use those to help your weaknesses? Yeah. Yes. So we certainly want to grow the strengths, and we want to get very, very real about where we have weakness. And we just did a podcast on through Cheshire Wellness Center last night. So if you want to jump down the rabbit hole on that one, it's got a self-assessment, some exercises in it. It's on the Facebook page. You can do that. But just taking the time for the self-reflection is so, so important, because if you don't, then you're going to end up like we're talking about with the mind unfounded. It's thinking about the future, it's thinking about the past. And holy moly, if you can't let go of what's in the past, if you can't give yourself permission to leave that in the past, and it's very, very hard to move forward. Like you were talking about, Allison, people that get into those thought circles or thought loops, man, it's like a tether, right? And so it's hard to move forward, and it's going to be really hard to move forward from coronavirus if we can't start putting that stuff in the past. Yeah, and when you think about repetitive thought patterns, they become, you're hardwiring those thoughts in your brain. If you have the same thought over and over, you're actually creating a hardwire. And the more you think, the more that strengthens that same thing, the more whatever that thought is, good or bad. Yeah, time to jump in that icy lake. You got to interrupt it. Yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to share would be how to use the 5 elements in Chinese medicine to kind of shift yourself out of a certain emotional state if you're having a hard time doing that. So to keep it super simple, there's 5 elements in Chinese medicine. Does this look right to you? Because it looks backwards to me. Okay.
Looks good.
It's the mirror on the camera. But we have fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And the elements nourish each other along this cycle, but they also control each other along like the arrow relationships. And each of the elements will have certain organ systems ascribed to them, but also different emotions. So a good example is the emotion or the phrase, anger and depression are 2 sides of the same coin. And sometimes people will say like depression or anger is depression turned inwards. I've heard that too. But Chinese medicine has been saying this for thousands of years. So you have the wood is the emotion of anger, but it's actually controlled by metal, whose emotion is grief. So if you find yourself really irritable or frustrated or angry, having a good cry or even just watching a sad movie will help to kind of shift you out, like transform that emotional state in a healthy way in your body. Another example of that would be like that overthinking mental pattern. That's the earth element, which is controlled by wood. And wood's all about vision and planning. And it's about your sort of manifesting your path and your life's purpose and the vision that you have in doing that. So maybe writing a to-do list or like breaking down, looking, where do you want to be in life? Am I going in that direction? And how can I chunk down priorities and make a plan to kind of get there? And another example I'll give you that kind of pertains to the current situation would be fear. So fear is the water element, and that's controlled by earth. And earth is about bringing people together, but unfortunately we can't really do that at the moment. But
We're doing it right now.
Yeah, we are.
I mean, there's plenty of ways
Yeah.
like to get together and just community involvement. And also like the season of earth is the late autumn, so it's about like gathering food and harvesting, so like self-nourishment, so like cooking a nice dinner for yourself and really sitting down to enjoy it, or just taking care of yourself in other ways, like doing a bubble bath or whatever it is to you, means to you to like nourish yourself, is a good way to shift out of that fear state in a healthy way.
One
was
thing
really cool.
that's awesome. I'm so fascinated. It makes so much sense. I want to say one of the things that I notice, I'm not out and about very much, but I've been in a grocery store a couple times in the last week. And I just want to encourage people, you can't pass the virus by looking somebody in the eyes from 6 feet away or smiling. It doesn't, I mean, people just seem so furtive. It seems like, if I look at you, I'm going to be in danger. And so, you can still connect with people with a smile. It doesn't spread COVID. Or your eyes. You don't have to avoid eye contact with people. And I think you can get a little bit too crazy with the isolation. It's not. You can still connect with people spirit to spirit, just looking at them. But look at them. Don't duck and yeah. Have you noticed that too? Do you notice that?
I've noticed that actually, and it's because I've been in the store and I'm looking at people and on purpose trying to like catch their eye and to see.
Yeah, and it's like,
it's almost like we were decreed to don't look at anybody.
Yeah.
Becky, I have a question for you. As far as like what your experience is with people who might be looking for something, like stress is playing out in many different ways. I know how, we see it in the body, and Allison and Jean, see it play out. If this becomes something that's like, it's really bringing people down, like, I know that to some degree there are probably mood changers or things that can help lift the mood. Is that something that you have available to know about?
We didn't even talk about this. I promise you this was not planned, but here I have it. A list of herbs. We have here, this is a super stress support we make, which is there are certain herbs, like this is rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil, eleuthero, schizandra berry, and lemon balm. So there are herbs, and they're all different ones, but a lot of them are adaptogens. They work by moderating cortisol and helping with that kind of thing. I love rhodiola, is probably one of my very favorite adaptogenic herbs, because not only does it help with these things, strengthen the adrenal glands, okay, which are the strength glands, the stress glands. And rhodiola is also wonderful because it is immune boosting. So you can use rhodiola rosea also to fight cancer and things like that, but it's a cortisol moderator. Bacopa monnieri is also known as Brahmi, is excellent for moderating cortisol and things like that. So yes, definitely in the herbal world, there's a multitude of different herbs that help people with stress. And I've had therapists in town who would send their clients up to get, like, we make a couple of herbal calm formulas. They vary a little bit depending on the person. Some people can't tolerate valerian well, so we'll use some without, and there's different combinations of things. But these are great rescues to have if you're in anxiety. Again, we always want to deal with what is the root. So, we don't want to say, okay, take your prescription Xanax or take your herbal calm. We want to eventually get to, why does this exist? Why is the cortisol out of whack? We don't want to use herbs as conventional medicine, but they have their place. It's like we have a botanical lax plus. So if you're constipated or a botanical lax, we can use herbs to get the plumbing going, or you can go and get X-Lax or Miralax or whatever. Eventually, we want to know, why is it not going? And that's what we want to get addressed. But
sure. Herbs can totally be a bridge, anything, and medications can be a bridge too.
Yeah.
I think it's all in how you use it. And we had a client that with all this going on, she wasn't able to sleep. And then if you're not able to sleep, then you have compounding problems that come after that, then being overtired and then more stress because of it. And so it kind of creates this snowball. And we checked her out and basically found that kava would be a good thing for her. A couple of pure, high quality kava, and then she was sleeping great, and it just changes everything about it. But again, like you were saying, is okay, then there's that, like we were talking about before, how are we processing what's going on in the world and handle that? Because it's not like, okay, now this is my fix, I'm just going to take kava for the rest of my life. It's okay, I can use this as a bridge. Maybe now I can get some sleep, and now I can then approach whatever my issue is, by getting to a root cause.
Yeah. And when it comes to the sleep, if you can use something like that, if sleep is an issue, and as you were talking about, Dr. Jean, if you use something like kava, if you can get somebody to sleep consistently for a couple of months using something like that, their clock will reset, and they will no longer need that. You've just got to. A good example is a woman who's had 3 kids and 6 years or whatever, and hasn't slept through the night, probably for many years, for one reason or the other. All of a sudden, that no longer is woken up and stuff like that, and can't sleep. And it's like her body her adrenal glands are messed up. They're not sure of when it's appropriate to be sleeping or not. So we can use gentle herbs to get people sleeping and get their body accustomed to, this is when you're supposed to be asleep and this is when you're supposed to be awake. And eventually then you no longer need to use those.
Yeah, right on. We look at it too in terms of the neurology. We look at the circadian rhythm, which is basically that when the sun comes up, we're awake, and when the sun goes down, we're asleep. And what can happen is that the circadian rhythm, where it resides in the brain, can get messed up, exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so you can retrain it. I mean, we're sort of talking about ruts that get in the brain. Like, the brain doesn't know, is it safe time to sleep or not? So we can start to retrain it, simple stuff like no screens an hour before bed. That means television, that means cell phones, it means everything. If you have Wi-Fi in the house, pull the plug on it, And if you really can't sleep, don't lie down in your bed, because you'll actually build a rut that will wire you for being awake while you're lying in bed. So sit in a chair, make it black in the room like a half hour before you're going to go to sleep. And when you're actually tired enough to fall asleep, then go and lie in bed, and that will actually rewire the neurology.
Awesome. Great
Talking
tip.
about like ruts in the brain, that's a really nice way to kind of visualize that. And just really basic sort of like neuroscience, the science of your brain. You have the cells in your brain are called neurons, and they've like that the cell body, and then they have these little like tentacles that are called dendrites, and they all have these dendrites, and they say neurons that fire together wire together, because the dendrites actually grow towards each other. So if you are in the same mindset, or you have the same thoughts over and over, those are going to be so much closer linked. And it's actually, it is a rut. It's like a pathway that you've developed in your brain. And it's like if someone asks you your name, you know it right away because that connection is there already. So if you're stuck in that state, things like herbs or even pharmaceuticals when the time is right, to get yourself just in a different place so that you can create a new pathway, those dendrites will actually loosen up and they'll start to form different pathways.
They've actually shown that on imaging, that, and it's the exact, what do I want to say, depiction of the one-track mind. Okay, so certain addiction, and just seeing this pathway being created. This particular one that I was reading about, and this was years ago, is addiction to pornography. They can actually find this pathway. So you just keep creating that same, continuous thought process. And it's the one-track mind, and it's physiological. Can actually be imaged and seen.
Yeah. So sensory, changing the sensory is really important. I was joking about throwing yourself in a icy lake, but the truth is that if you bring in a different input into the nervous system, it will have to find new pathways, because it can't run the same pattern. So it's like we're so used to being safe and secure and comfortable. And truthfully, that's like more of a euphemism for death in terms of nervous system growth than anything else. So get outside of your comfort zone, do something exciting, it will shift.
Well said.
So we have a few minutes left, and we can certainly go over, but a couple of comments come in. Amy was commenting on the volume being quite low, but I'm hearing everything fine. I think it might be on your end, Amy. Jen is asking, hi, thanks everyone for creating a community health meeting. As we're created to live in community, the stress of having minimal human contact, our children, teenagers, and college kids is unprecedented. What are suggestions you have for kids that are becoming even more connected to their phones and computers, how they de-stress, supplements, or different methods?
It's a great
This is a challenging one, I think. We're finding, we have 3 and 6 year olds, and it's amazing how they're so drawn to these devices. So we really, very much limit that time, just always, even, aside from any of this stuff. I think one of the challenges that probably people are having is now that all the school, especially school age children, they've all gone online. It's part of, so it's even more screen time. So I think, like getting out, I think is a huge thing, getting out in nature, putting that as part of the structure, maybe, and certainly limiting that screen time.
What were the age groups, Gene?
I'm sorry?
The age groups on those children?
My children?
Yeah, and specifically to the question, because it makes a difference in terms of how we handle it depending on what they're wired for. How old are they?
She doesn't really specify, because
okay. So that does make a difference depending on where they are developmentally. If you're dealing with young kids, just providing something new, like you just said, Gene, getting outside makes a big difference. If they're kind of coming up into that like 8, 9, 10, 11 age, that's where you really need to give them like a sense of challenge, one that's within their reach, because there's a biological need for a rite of passage at that time. and our society doesn't provide that. So if they're going to reach for anything that's going to try and do that for them because we're not doing it, and it could be in the form of a cell phone if that's what's available to them. And then when you get into more adolescents and teens, they need something a bit more than that. I mean, you really got to like get out and get them engaged and give them an experience in order to sort of start to break that. But it starts with you. And if you're wondering how you can help somebody get away from that, you have to live being away from that and make it exciting. The only reason, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, just even with young kids though, like in our kids, I think what we see is that a sense of purpose, I think, is really, they want to participate, they want to learn, they want to, make the grilled cheese, and, even though they're real young, they want to participate and do things. And I think that,
yeah,
can
that's right around 4
focus in the right
years
direction.
old. That's another rite of passage. Yeah, we don't honor that, but that's happening then too.
So, supplements, I mean, it's like, I think the basic stuff, I mean, you want to, again, try not to feed them too much sugar. If you feed your kid a ton of sugar at any age, it's going to be a more challenging time for them. So obviously you can't, we've tried this, you can't totally keep it away from them, but, you try to balance that and make sure you're balancing it with enough good and healthy foods. And, there's definitely supplements. I mean, we do some basic supplements with our kids, just, basic multivitamins. It's got to be quality, by the way. You don't want to give them this garbage stuff. You want to make sure it's good, high quality stuff. So there's lots of different ways you can go with that. Yeah.
Jen,
What about like projects or games, or doing family connection things, like you were saying, like cooking the grilled cheese, like making dinner together, making each meal together. And Allison brought the mindfulness, bringing them into the mindfulness and the appreciation of what they're making. This is a great time for family connection. Like, you have to do your schoolwork, finish that. And then after that, like even household chores or, certain projects, rearranging a room together. I don't know. Maybe it's just a suggestion, but including them on activities that you have to do and teaching them new morals, new responsibilities, perhaps.
Yeah. And again, like rituals, like we don't do it all the time, but we try to, like, if we sit down at dinner and have a moment, to give thanks and, hold hands and say a blessing, so whatever it is, whatever ritual, I think is an important thing. Jean, what about waking up in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 hours, and not being able to get back to sleep without using more melatonin or essential oils? I use a BiPAP, which can hinder as well.
Yeah.
I mean, just real quick, like what I see most of the time, if you're waking up in the night, you a lot of times you got a liver is getting backed up. That can be one thing. So.
Or just that cortisol being off, that's usually if you're waking up, around 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. So getting circadian clock regulated. And there are different things you can use to help do that. We talked about the herbs. There's also the timing of when you take your melatonin, if you're using melatonin, which is hugely health protective in many ways, many more health benefits than just sleep. But that's, getting that circadian clock reset. And there are different ways, there are different things you can do to help you get that cortisol tamed, to not do that anymore, but it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think, you could do a little bit of a cleanse, maybe. It doesn't even have to be using herbs or supplements or things like that, just by, sort of cleaning out for a while some of the processed foods and the sugars and stuff, and getting down to a, pretty simple vegetable kind of diet, protein diet, and, just giving your system a chance to reset. And some of the things we talked about earlier, like you're saying, like watch out for the computers right before bed, and all those things I think can help. Sometimes if you don't know exactly what you're dealing with, it can be a little bit of a challenge. But I think what we were talking about before with the herbs and things, I don't think melatonin as a long-term solution is probably what you want. because your body is supposed to make that itself. You know, you don't want to necessarily have it coming from the outside in on an ongoing basis. If you can,
We'll have to talk about that, you and I.
Yeah.
And another thing you can try too is just not avoid eating for a couple hours before bed, because your liver is going to be filtering your blood while you sleep, and that'll help you stay rested while you're sleeping and feel rejuvenated when you wake up. So if you don't have any, especially having alcohol, or if you just don't have anything to eat and you just stick to kind of water or maybe like a liver cleansing herb or something like that, it might make a difference for you too.
Cool.
Yep.
Great.
Awesome.
Good one, guys.
Nice.
Pamela chimed in as also, you know, I guess he's suggesting, from what we were talking about before, suggesting moving their bodies for the kids, get in nature, dance, ride bikes, walk, play tag, run challenges, yoga. I know I've been playing a lot more tag and hide and seek at my house these days. So,
Yeah, great stuff.
so thank you for that. Okay. Thanks, Jen. So I don't, if, right about noon here. Does anybody have anything else they want to close up with before we wrap the meeting up?
No, just thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks all of you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Other questions about Chinese medicine, feel free to email me.
Yeah, I think, you know, Allison, my thought is you could do a whole webinar just on that circle that you showed us. That would be really cool, actually.
We'd love to see one.
You should set one up, and I'll be on it if you do it. That's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so we'll be back next week, and I'm not sure we didn't quite come up with a topic yet, but I'm sure it'll be good. We'll probably discuss it this week amongst us. And then, you know, if you all have any suggestions, you know, for those of you who know us each individually, you could also, you know,
Contact
email
us.
and contact us and talk about what you might have some challenges in and what you might want us to focus on more. And we would love to do that. And I'm just checking these questions.
Thanks, everyone. I gotta run.
All right.
Bye,
Everyone,
Matt.
take care. We'll see you next time. Have a
See
great,
you next
have a
time.
great one.
Yep.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you next week. Oops.